Hey everyone, I'm Charles Suggs, staff engineer at SmartLogic.
And I'm Emma Whamond, a software developer at SmartLogic, and we're your hosts for Season 15, Episode 11. We're joined by Flora Petterson, an Elixir developer, conference speaker, puppeteer, and maker. In this episode, we're discussing what happens when software systems forget, how the beam helps them recover, and how documentation, mentorship, storytelling, and creative experimentation help teams preserve knowledge. Hi, Flora.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you could join us. So before we jump into the topic, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, what you've been up to lately?
Sure. So I am from and live in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm a mom with 3 kids, and I'm a self-taught Elixir developer, and I've been working professionally for about 2.5 years.
Great. And my understanding is you came to Elixir from a pretty unusual direction. Could you walk us through the journey you took?
I did. It's kind of a long story, so I'll try to TLDR it. So I grew up performing with my mother, who is a professional puppeteer, and my dad's a musician. So I grew up in a very artsy family in New Orleans. I got to college and got more interested in more technical things. So actually, I was first exposed to programming in college. I took a Python class, and I did a summer training where I learned like Dreamweaver and Flash. But then I kind of didn't want to pursue that professionally. So I worked as a self-employed artist. I was a bartender. I did marketing and nonprofits and lots of different things. Then I was working in marketing at a software consultancy, and I attended the Big Elixir in New Orleans. And that was my first exposure to the community. And I just got really inspired by all the talks there. I saw John Karstens give a talk on nerves that was really inspiring. And then I just started doing this kind of as a hobby. I went to MPEX Mountain and met Frank Hunleth and just was really drawn to nerves. So I started doing hobby projects with nerves, specifically trying to build animatronics. And around that time, I unexpectedly lost my job when I was pregnant in my second trimester. And so all of a sudden I had time and was trying to apply for jobs. And one of my friends in the community was just like, you should be a developer. And my first reaction was, absolutely not. I am not qualified. And so I tried to get into a boot camp. None of them would take me because I was about to have a baby and I had doctor's appointments. They were like, come back after the baby. So I was kind of forced to self-teach. And I attended Bruce Tate's mentoring group, which was really helpful. And I just got really stubborn about it and studied and studied and studied. Bruce invited me to go to Gig City Elixir, which I attended with my 10-week-old baby. And that's where I met some people. And then about a year after I lost my job, I was attending Strange Loop with my new team. So it was a pretty wild ride.
What year was the Gig City?
The one that I attended, 2023. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's a nice little conference.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I've been highly recommend it. Yeah, it was great.
And you also studied physics. You grew up around professional puppetry, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
How do those interests with nerves, how do they come together?
It is a very fun collaboration because I get to do all of the math and coding and technical thought that I really love, and then also, move things around with objects. So it's just kind of an extension of, something I've been doing since I was 4 years old, but I just get to do it in a more technical way. So yeah. It's a lot of fun. That was a fun thing about it is I kind of knew I had a backup. So if I was trying to do something and I couldn't get it to work with hardware, then I would get it to work a different way. And it was kind of a given. It was kind of a give and take,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an perfect environment, like between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Your talk after the crash, which begins with the idea that any message passing through an application can be forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of diving into the conversation here. What does it mean for software systems to forget?
So when I wrote that, I was specifically thinking about a few things. Technically, I was thinking about storing data in memory, so process state and ETS, what happens when a node or process restarts without a mechanism to persist, or what happens when persistence fails. But that analogy would work in other contexts, and I chose the word forgetting instead of a more technical term to specifically make it more universal, kind of set the context that the talk was a one-time experience that was, very non-traditional and focused more on storytelling. So this is a kind of a long disclaimer, but I think it's good to have the context. So I was inspired by Sasa Urich's Tell Me a Story talk. I was inspired by a talk by Joe Armstrong where he showed an illustration from an overhead projector that he used to evangelize Erlang before PowerPoint existed. And then also Elizabeth Bishop's poem, One Art, which starts, "The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster." And so going back to storytelling, the theme of forgetting and remembering in literature has so many beautiful examples. And I think because of my background and interests, I think it's really important to be interdisciplinary and bring those thoughts and ways of knowing into the way we think about technical problems. So that's why I use the word forgetting, I guess, instead of something else. It was intentional, yeah.
So, first of all, incredible. It's so true. Both your background in storytelling and the way that software is built and needs to be built today. So, in your opinion, what is the state of recovery in software today? Are teams truly designing for inevitable failure, or is recovery still treated as something to address after the fact, after a crash?
Yeah, so I can't speak for other teams, but in my work and the people I've talked to and kind of talked to me after the talk, I think we're just all doing our best. And anyone who cares really deeply about user experience wants to avoid failure. I know I think about it a lot, but it's a really hard problem. It's not just designing to prevent the failure, but setting up tools and building the muscle to fix the failures. I'm still at the beginning of my journey on that, and I'm just so in awe of others who do that. But yeah, I would love to hear other stories on how people are approaching it. But yeah, it's something I definitely think about a lot, and I hope others too.
In the teams that you're working on where you're dealing with recovery after crashes, are you working in kind of centralized systems, or are you also handling this on distributed systems?
Both. Yeah.
Both?
hmm
How is it different between the two? Is it pretty much the same, or do you have additional considerations when something is distributed? Are there additional tools you reach for?
I don't know how much I think about it in the way of different types of systems versus more kind of team culture. I think a lot about Conway's law and the link between communication structure and organizations and leadership priorities. And I think that, prioritizing the importance of thinking of how to fail is really important. And so I think that's kind of universal between systems.
Hmm. In sport, in life, and in software.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I hear you have taken the stance that failure is the steady state, not the emergency. And most engineers I know intellectually agree with that, but then design as if outages are surprises.
Yeah.
What changes when you're actually taking the steady state framing seriously in software?
Yeah. Well, I know that, I do think about it a lot. Like all of us, my code falls short, we all don't know what we don't know, Dunning-Kruger. So I think the main thing that changes for me is it makes me take learning and tech debt really seriously. And I've been coding for 2.5 years. Erlang has been around for decades. There's so much to learn. I'm sure if you ask me this question again in a decade, my answers will change. And I think it's a good thing. And so I think that, just really taking seriously that Erlang has such a deep, list of tools. I recently asked several people I know, just out of curiosity, what their favorite parts of OTP were. And the answers were so varied, like mixed releases, code server, code upgrade, other things I hadn't heard of before. Even the most senior people I know are still attending conferences, asking questions, sending me papers. And so I think that we can only design, as well as what our skills and knowledge are. So, I think that's the main, wouldn't ever want to assume that I know the best way to do something.
This feels to me like it has echoes of the Bruce Tate and James Gray book about building systems with OTP. The exact title I'm drawing a blank on right now. I'll pull that up.
Actually,
but,
I
you have it handy?
have it. I do have it right here. Yep.
Yeah,
It is
fantastic book.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, this was the main theme of my talk is the idea of GenServer life cycles. And I was really drawn to it because I know I had heard a lot, the phrase let it crash, right? And I hadn't thought as much about, or I wanted to learn more about what happens. Because one of my mentors is always like, that is not a silver bullet. You need to know when not to let it crash, when to restart, how, all of the wonderful options in a child spec, really think through them and not just go through the defaults. And so, yeah, the GenServer lifecycle talks about 3 stages, which is, starting it, the supervision, and then the configuration of the child spec. And so that was the main 3 parts that I wanted to really think about. And again, those are things that are universal to any life cycle process, which is why I like the idea of life cycles.
For our listeners, we did an interview with Bruce Tate and his co-author. I
Mhm.
think we might be having on here in a couple of weeks. So stay
Great.
tuned for that.
Love Bruce.
Yeah.
He is one of my main mentors. Just talked to him the other day. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, Bruce is great. Coming back to this, so as developers, we sometimes treat datable. Sometimes we treat data as durable once it's been sent or stored. But what kind of failures challenge that assumption? When is that a problematic way to approach things?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of several ways, but it's just, the main thing is all the things we can't control, the fallacies of the distributed system. Network is reliable, dependencies go down, and they don't, they don't tell, vendors don't tell us what's going on. Human error, somebody unplugs or deletes something. I think we all have horror stories of, things like that happening. And, yeah, it's, kind of good to be humble and remember that, I think.
Could you give us some examples that you've seen recently? I know there are like just countless examples, but anything that comes to top of mind for you? Anything personal?
The main example that I think of, it's not really a work thing, but it's the thing that I I think it was a good example for me. When I first started learning Elixir, I really didn't understand this concept at all. And, I didn't understand a lot. And so I was using IEX pretty regularly. And I remember, learning that variables are immutable and then closing IEX and expecting them to still be there. And, that was really frustrating for me. And so I think that's it's a simple example, but it's, a good example of losing, losing state and, how ephemeral it is in life.
So then if you lose
Mhm,
it,
mhm.
what do you do next? If you lose the
Well,
data, how
yeah.
do you yeah.
Well, I think hopefully, ideally, we think about that in advance, because once it's gone, in that scenario, once it's gone, it's gone, So
Mhm.
part
Mhm.
of, what the life cycle, theory kind of model just emphasizes that it's important that when you restart, that there is a way to rehydrate or persist. But yeah, I mean, that, persist. But that it's really, it depends, right? Really depend on the kind of system. But in this talk, I was specifically thinking about Gen servers.
Mhm. Mhm.
So when you lose something, how do you determine whether it should be recovered or recreated, retried, or just simply abandoned altogether?
Yeah, I think that also really depends upon the system. I know I have a mentor who says it depends a lot, and so I really agree with that. But I think the main thing is, kind of the Eric Evans like domain driven design I really embrace, and so ideally that would be something you would know what needs to be recovered and what needs to be forgotten early on, and really design for that, so that hopefully, ideally, there aren't surprises later. You're really protecting the most important things, and that again, that's going to vary on compliance and regulation and ethics, what should be saved and stored. Because obviously you don't want to overload your system with saving too much. Eviction's important.
Absolutely. Could you
Mhm.
could you talk to us a little bit more about that? When forgetting is useful, maybe privacy or GDPR's right to be forgotten, ephemeral messages, log
Mhm.
rotation. Where's the line?
In a way, I mean, ethically, I kind of personally want to hold on to as little as possible, right? That's kind of the at least my personal philosophy. And so it can be really tempting to say, oh, we're going to need this later, and maybe that's true. I'm really just speaking for myself. But, there's so much tracking right now that I really love that there are movements like, things like GDPR happening to try to cut that down because, yeah, we don't need to save everything.
I feel like there are good parallels with our minds here
Mhm,
too, and overloading it with too much information and needing to figure out what to shed, what to evict, what's
mhm,
important to keep it up front, and
mhm,
what can we shove back into like glacier storage for,
mhm.
later retrieval the few times that we actually need it. Uh,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, I guess we tend to design systems that somewhat mimic our own understanding and our own systems. Is what we understand, or is what we know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, I think I talked a lot and think a lot about the power of imagination. I think because when I started, there was so much I didn't know how to do. Like I didn't learn how to write tests for a while. And
Hmm.
so when I was thinking about, predicting things that would go wrong or debugging, it was all in my head. I'd be like, okay, well, if this happens and this happens, then this thing would go and this path would happen. And I remember one of my mentors would say, just write a test, Flora. And then once I was able to do that, but in a way I was kind of like testing in my head a little bit. I don't know. And so I try to remember to do that now, because it's so easy to just like kind of go into autopilot and start like typing and, just rating your regular unit tests but I try to really think through things in my head first because especially in the age of AI, brains and imagination are still important.
Hmm. Hmm. Follow up, and it just like totally disappeared on me there. It got evicted before I was
Got
ready.
evicted. Yeah.
It did.
Maybe it'll
Uh,
come back.
yeah, yeah. Maybe it's stuffed in a backup somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, oh, so you know, some you've been talking some about like as you've been learning new things with Elixir and that journey that you've been on. What things do you think have served you well in doing that? In figuring out what are the important things to learn now? What are the things that I can maybe forget for now and come back to later as I'm learning, so I'm not taking in too much at once? Um,
Yeah.
what do you think has served you well there, and maybe what hasn't?
That's a great question. I think that for me, there's a tension because on the one hand, I'm really driven by what I'm interested in, and so if I'm doing something for a while, I kind of want to switch it up. But on the other hand, I have an amazing network of mentors, and I've gotten in the habit of asking them for help, of saying, "Hey, these are these three things I want to learn. Which one do you think would be the most helpful for me to learn now?"
Hmm. Hmm.
Or I'm thinking about diving into this. Should I? And sometimes they'll be like, no, like stick where you are and really, really start like get into the guts of understanding live view. Like this is where you need to be. So, it's a balance of my interests and really trusting the people that got me here.
I feel like this also kind of dovetails with like the concept of supervision in software. So this is in a way a double question.
Yeah,
Wh- What can supervision and process recovery protect us from, and where do those protections end?
sure. I mean, there's so much that supervision process can protect us from. Process isolation is so important. But the main response I have to that question is just it doesn't protect us from ourselves. One of the common things I hear when I ask my mentors is just don't make assumptions. Don't assume that just because stuck a supervisor somewhere that everything is going to be fine. That's something that I felt when I got in. It's like, oh, well, this is great. I have this tool. I don't have to worry about it. And that's not true. You really need to worry about the complex details of how things are implemented. Yeah, that's my main thought for that.
So, how can teams test the recovery paths before encountering a real incident? Any tips there?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had firsthand experience of chaos testing and that sort of thing. I think it's really interesting and cool, and I've definitely read about it and would love to one day, but that's not something I've done. I would go back to, just testing in general, but it's silly, but really like the idea of imagination and talking things through and pairing, like I feel like we've really caught a lot of things before they happen just by, again, thinking things through. I keep saying this, but I just really believe in the power of relying on ourselves and our imagination and the knowledge of those who came before us, and yeah, not just our tools.
All right. Love that. I mean, it definitely just goes into every facet. Anything that's human or created by a human, right? So we've talked about the information a software system can lose. We also want to explore what happens when knowledge disappears from an engineering team. There's some various philosophies around how to do good documentation.
Yeah.
Some say just keep it as close to the code it refers to as possible. Some like a lot of markdown files in a separate directory or even a separate repo. Some agree with Uncle Bob Martin's a comment is a failure to express yourself in code. If you fail, write a comment, but try not to fail.
Yeah.
Do you have a philosophy you aim for with documentation?
I do. And it's funny because I gave a talk on documentation, about almost a year and a half ago. And my philosophy has really changed since then because at that time, I was newer and I had just come from working as a technical writer. So I really kind of had this idea that like everything should, watch your Oxford commas, like let's have things like really thorough. And now it's not that I don't value that, but I have had the experience for myself of adding in a doc test and then looking at the text of the function doc and realizing that like the things that it says are not the things that it's doing. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. And it requires so much human diligence just to keep that up to date, and sometimes that is just not there. So now when in my own code, I try to really focus on naming, that's so important. Readability, just, and which is still the same concepts of writing, right? Making things concise, making things easy to follow, alphabetizing, all the things. And then also tests. A lot of times I'll, if I want to understand how something works, I'll just go straight to the test file because that will, again, it's something I can trust. And I'm not saying, all of the things, live books and markdown files and, cheat sheets, all the XDoc features are truly amazing. It's just not the first thing that I reach for now. But if I'm testing out a new library or something and there's a live book, like, thank you. It's an incredible tool. It's just not something that I reach for first anymore. Although I pulled out like all my favorite books. So, and I talk about it in the talk, but this book, Living Documentation, is incredible. So I highly recommend people, reading this because he talks a lot about the limitations of sharing knowledge in a team. Oh, and the original question was losing knowledge, I think, which I forgot about that part. And I think that is so important and heartbreaking when that happens, especially now. There can be a lot of a churn on teams in our industry. And, writing things down is good, but there's no substitute for also pairing and that kind of knowledge transfer that way. So, I don't think there's a good solution, just a perfect solution.
Yeah, I think tests seem to I feel like developers have a tendency to keep them up to date more than any other kind of documentation.
Yes.
And in a way, they're like our way of communicating how we expect the system to be used and function.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you also had the experience where the test name doesn't match what the test is doing.
Yes.
Which is why, I really look at, the content. I've done that, the content of them. And honestly, doc tests, I sometimes don't have the same context that I'm looking for. So really just the test files. Yeah.
In your XDoc talk, you described joining a project and finding important knowledge that was scattered across conversations, specifications, comments, commit messages, documentation, maybe more. How did you wrangle that info as a new person trying to understand that landscape? And what did it teach you about organizational memory?
Yeah, that was such a fun experience. I guess the thing about that is that I wasn't just learning a new team or a new application, I was learning how to be a developer for the first time. I was learning to write. I'd never written a test before. There was a lot that I was learning all at once. And so I think that onboarding would be a different experience for me now because the amount of knowledge I have to learn would be different. So that's a caveat, but it just really taught me about kind of different ways of knowing and different personalities and how much of this just can't be automated, because I think I was a little naive. I really thought like we can write this all down. And I don't think that's possible anymore. I think that, there's just so much that builds up inside of a person and inside of a team dynamic that you really only learn by doing. So, yeah. Not to say it's not good to write things down. It's wonderful to write things down. I'm not saying that. It's really amazing. And I think all of us really do try. But I think that there's always going to be little, I can think of things like knowing who to call and the other team. And if you have their cell phone number and if they're going to answer the phone in the middle of the night because they know who you are, kind of personal relationships, things like that, things that just can't be transferred as easily are that's the sort of thing that kind of knowledge is the sort of thing I'm talking about, I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I think we've all experienced this, especially when onboarding and if a budget is tight and we don't have the budget to add to documentation, or someone is the knowledge silo and they have left, and they haven't documented much about their experience and what they know. In your opinion, what kinds of technical knowledge are most likely to disappear when they only live in one developer's head?
I think sometimes why decisions were made, like why a path wasn't chosen. Like maybe some different tools were evaluated and one was chosen and there was a reason why. I think that is a hard thing to keep in mind, so it's easy to kind of go down the same path again if that information isn't there. Yeah. Or even, even not even if someone leaves, like, I might forget why I didn't do something a certain way. That certainly happens in my nerves projects where I'll like go back and be like, oh, I've done this before. So, yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind is decision making. That being said, I think our team is pretty good about that, but I know that's an important thing to keep in mind.
The why is often the most important question.
Yeah.
It's one that sometimes teams, like you said, don't get to explore very much. Like the business domain as to why things are done. And again, what might be lost in terms of data if that hasn't been documented.
Yeah. And I think that, is another opportunity to just really collaborate with stakeholders and like really rely on the knowledge and expertise of UX designers and product managers. And we have an incredible one that I work with I get to work with our team and really valuing that. I think that's going back to documentation. That's another challenge because if we're only documenting inside of our code base, and this is mentioned living documentation, that's not the complete story, right? And so that's another challenge of, can you really document the technical implementation without documenting the business context, But yeah, I think that is, yeah, we can undervalue that sometimes.
You've connected better knowledge sharing with joy as developer, business joy, operations joy.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. And I want to credit that to Brian Hunter, who would credit part of that to Ruby. As I've said before, I'm really driven by my interests and having fun. And, when things are hard to do, when information is hard to find, when you find yourself blocked a lot, that is definitely a joy killer, and we all want to be making things. We all want to be improving, user experience, I think. And just the less friction there is to that, because it's so frustrating, if you work on a feature and then you find out that that's not what they wanted, and that, yeah. So it's communication and, but writing things down is communication. So, yeah.
Along the line with communication, earlier with the season, we got to interview Sasha, and he spoke about how a pull request should tell a story, which reminds me of your background.
Yeah.
We also got to interview Mike Radcliffe, who
Mm-hmm.
pointed out that humans have always transferred knowledge through
Mm-hmm.
storytelling and conversation. What what kinds of context, judgment, or institutional memory can only be preserved through human relationships and mentorship?
Um, hmm. I could think of a couple different ways of that. I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of us think that some of what we do is more of a trade, right? And so when it's hard to just learn. I mean, I found it very hard to just read and do it on my own. You learn a lot of it on the job from other people. So I think specifically in software, just little things, right? How someone what shortcuts they're taking, what how they're using Git, just the little things you pick up when you pair. I think you only get from human interaction, and then yeah, the other thing in this, I don't know. This is just the thing I keep thinking of. One of the main things I've gotten from my relationships with other people is kind of confidence building and just learning how to make decisions and make calls and have takes, because that's a really when to say no is a big one. And that is, because some of the code, you can read the docs, you can learn that, but really learning how to work effectively with other people on a team, that is, I think, something that, is a very human thing to learn for sure.
Expanding on mentorship, you've spoken about how that's been important
Mhm,
in your own developer journey, and you've cited some examples
mhm,
here
mhm,
already. And maybe you've covered this, but what
mhm.
what did they provide that a tutorial or a book or documentation just could not?
Um, I often joke that they believe in me when I more than I believe in myself sometimes, especially in the first year starting out. We all experience imposter syndrome. I mean, it's really, there were many times where I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this, and I was lucky enough that when I asked for help, they were always there for me. So I guess material support kind of, like I remember just really simple things like being not simple, I emailed Bruce and was like, I'm going to bring my baby, and he was like, cool, we're going to find you, mother's room, and we're going to find you babysitter. So I remember I emailed Strange Loop and was like, hey, I need a place to pump, and they're like, cool, here's a conference room. Very it's not just the verbal things, it's also the encouragement and just making sure that people have what they need to succeed, I guess. Yeah. Because it can, if you feel like you don't belong, that can be really hard. And so building that sense of belonging and that sense of
Yeah.
welcome is, and just accessibility, like being able to attend something um, is really important. I mean, all the free tickets that they offer, like there's just a lot out there to make people feel welcome.
It's a huge, huge part, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, talking about mentorship, talking about documentation, talking about storytelling between
Mm-hmm.
either pairing or just
Mm-hmm.
encouragement, what is your opinion about the state of mentorship in software right now? I know that AI has taken over. Do you have any particular opinions about juniors in this industry, or those that are self-taught like yourself?
Yeah. I don't know if my journey would have been possible now, you know, in this current environment. But Bruce Tate is currently writing a series on LinkedIn about AI and juniors, and I've learned I would really recommend that because he has been in the weeds of mentoring and encouraging juniors for so long. And I know that I've talked to him that it is very different now. But I mean, one thing that I found, or a mindset that I kind of had when I was learning and thinking about making a career of this, is that I knew that somebody who wants somebody who like went to Stanford and had a CS degree and has been programming forever and is like knows all the things in a hiring situation is not going to want me, right? I'm not the person. So I just tried really hard to be myself and to follow my interests. And a lot of the things I did were clearly not, really designed to build a career, but it worked. And so I guess if there was a piece of information or kind of approach, that's something that I think works for people because, yeah. But yeah, the AI part is definitely a challenge. But I mean, even with AI, there are a lot of opportunities to be creative and imaginative there too. So yeah, that's my approach.
The blog post series you're referring to, is that the one he called AI Coding Crisis, perhaps? It's like a 4-part series he just put out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is
Okay.
the one. Mm-hmm.
We'll make
Yep.
sure to put that in the show notes. Maybe this is different now, but I've certainly heard from a number of different founders, people that run development shops, hiring managers, that sometimes they actually prefer hiring someone who's more junior because they're able to train them in the way that they think is writing good software and being a good contributor to a code base, instead of necessarily trying to maybe unlearn some bad habits or what that shop considers to be bad habits. So I think sometimes maybe that's changing with AI and everyone wants a senior now, but I think there's still some benefit there.
Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's definitely something that I have experienced with my team, is that, especially when I started out, I would see things. And also, this kind of goes back to team culture, like you said, like who's hiring, because the people I really I've been lucky enough to spend time with, really value everyone's knowledge, right? There's no hierarchy. If they don't know something, they're the first ones to ask a question, not afraid of looking stupid, which then empowers other people to ask questions. And, again, it's building that confidence, I think. So yeah, absolutely. If it's a team that really wants to have a brand new perspective, and that's really important. And that's certainly been my experience, is I get to learn their ways of doing things. And who knows, maybe when I get to a new job, I'll be stubborn and won't want to change, but hopefully not.
I think the only stupid question is the question that wasn't asked.
Yeah. I have to remind myself of that. It was much easier when I started because I didn't know who anyone was. So I didn't know enough to be intimidated. Like, I remember when I met Frank Hunleth, I had his whole long conversation. I thought he was amazing, this great dad. And it wasn't until almost a month later that I was talking to someone else. They're like, who is this guy? Like, Flora, he co-created Nerves. I had no idea. And if I had known that, I probably would have been much more nervous. And so I think that's part of it at the beginning, is you kind of have that beginner mindset. And I don't, even with my talks, I didn't know what I didn't know. So it's easy to kind of let the doubt creep in the more that we don't know, or the more we're aware of how much we don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine you being stuck in your ways in a new job, given all of your career changes and how curious you seem to be, and
I hope so.
and your imagination, and
yeah,
it's wonderful. I just wanted to dig into that a little bit more. What did building animatronics, controlling physical objects teach you that you might not have learned through a conventional software program?
Yes. That was, this is going to sound kind of, not having a teacher really helped me, because I could have asked for help more, but I really wanted to figure it out myself. And so, and the learning curve for Nerves, at least for me, because it was Nerves and Elixir, was really steep, and I just kind of had this mindset that I will figure it out. And so, getting through that process, and the first time I got an LED to turn on, the first time I got a motor to spin, was really satisfying in a way that learning some web development stuff wasn't, because it's just not as hard to, at least for me, to get Phoenix up and so that was really helpful. And then I think that also, again, because that's how I started, I still approach code in this kind of creative way. I'm going to make something that's going to be fun for me. I'm going to make something that's useful for a person. So it feels very, I don't know, tactile, because we aren't in the data centers. We're not seeing the users. It's really easy to kind of forget that we're not just typing all day, and so that's a great thing I find about hobby projects, is that, you see the NeoPixels light up, and it's really gratifying. So yeah, I think that was one thing I learned for sure. Yeah.
Was it a nice change of pace from just writing something for the web to actually working with your hands and just using that different part of your brain and your creativity? even if you're still writing software to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was really nice. And I think partially because even though I've only been doing this professionally for a couple of years, I've been messing with websites for, for most of my life. So that felt less interesting, or, that was something so yeah, doing something new was really helpful for sure.
Have you, and you're welcome to decline this
Hmm.
question, but have you, I know you've talked about using real tools with your
Hmm.
children,
Yeah.
rather than just relying on oversimplified
Hmm.
educational substitutes.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people would be interested in understanding and hearing your approach. Could you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love this question. So I, I think I said that in my first talk, which was my nerves animatronics talk, and I was wrong because I did not know the tools that were out there. So I now that I mean I think Scratch is kind of ubiquitous, but it's an amazing tool for learning coding. And Sam Aaron's Sonic Pi, if you aren't familiar with it, that combines music and programming, is also an incredible resource. So there are good there. I'm sure there's more. There are really great tools out there already. So I don't want to kind of say that, but and I find that at least with my kids, it's really cool for them to know they're doing the same thing that I'm doing. And so, like if I have some live view up, my my daughter, well, she'll be like, "Can I change the words?" And so she might, I'll let her come over, if I'm doing a hobby thing, and type in, change the page title like a Pokemon name or put some emojis in. And she really loves doing that. It's a simple, and it really is the same thing that I do, And I think that Nerve's live book is kind of the absolute best example of that, because I know that people do use this, in production Nerve stops to test out hardware. But also you can, I think I have some right here. You can just like hook up LEDs to like a Raspberry Pi and control that. And I was doing that yesterday, and my tween was super into it, and that you are executing code, like you can see the code cell, and so, and you can, change things around. So, having something that kids are already interested in is really important because, kind of like me, like people want to do what's fun. And I know when I was younger, I feel like when I thought of programming and robotics, I thought of BattleBots, which, was cool, but wasn't really my thing. It wasn't what I wanted to do. But now if I think of like, oh, I want to make a skirt that lights up when I spin, or I want to make, my kids want to make like a little, Halloween, skeleton that scares people when they walk up because it moves and makes a sound, finding like your ideas and also, the creativity, but also real things, is really fun. And that gets you the hard parts, right? That's what motivates you, because it's easy at the beginning, but definitely you got to push through to get what you want.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned, we've been mentioning a lot of conferences. Are we going to get to see you at Elixir Conf in September?
No, I've never been to Elixir Conf. I would love to go, maybe next year. I will be at Goatmeyer though. I'm attending. I'm not giving a talk, but I am helping out, and there will be surprises in other ways. So, all I'm at liberty to say. But yeah, I wish I could go to Elixir Conf, but not this year.
Cool. Have a great time at Goatmeyer. It seems like a
Yeah,
fun conference. We
yeah,
will be at Elixir Conf in Chicago.
awesome.
But
Oh, that'll be so great. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I hope to be there soon.
Segueing back just
Mhm,
for a quick minute, my dad actually started teaching himself how to program
mhm,
later in life
mhm,
after a long career in marketing.
mhm. Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of
Mhm.
yourself. And when he
Yeah.
was teaching himself Ruby, I was coding alongside him, and
Mhm.
we created like little projects for the neighborhood kids when
Oh.
I was very young. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's inspired me to like keep my creativity and continue to try to build, you know, new software, look for fixes. So I think it's really wonderful that you're giving that to the next generation.
Yeah, I hope so. It's funny. It makes me think about my dad who, um, he just has this mentality that if something breaks, he can fix it. And he does. I can remember one time we were in New Mexico when I was a kid, and our van broke down, and we weren't in a situation where we could just like go to a mechanic. And so he just like stayed under the car in the New Mexico heat for like multiple days and made it work. And we drove all the way back to New Orleans. And I think that that sort of mindset is something, I know it's something that I have. Like when it is kind of a silly thing to be like, I've never written Elixir, really. Let me go and learn how to do embedded and and solder things. But it never really, I never had any doubt that I could do it. I just thought it would take a long time and be hard. And it was. But yeah, dads are great.
They are tough as nails, apparently, in the New Mexican heat. That's wild.
Yeah, he's great. Anyway, he's also a musician. So, I mean, I think that is part of my, my mindset is like, just try things and see what happens. Yeah.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So, along that same line, what gives you hope about the current state of the Elixir community? Is there anything that you're looking forward to right now?
Yeah, I really love what Lars has done with Goatmeyer because he has such an emphasis. Unfortunately, since MPEX and Big Elixir aren't around, it's harder to, kind of maybe meet people as much. But just this emphasis on building a community, having free workshops, really sharing knowledge. I think that events like that are really important. I know there's a conference coming up in Texas too that, building that kind of in-person interaction, I think is the way that worked for me. So yeah, I think that initiatives like that are really putting in the work to build community is what's I'm most excited about because we're all we have, we can't just building a community outside of our jobs is really important and exciting.
So having that human connection in the age of technology where a lot of us can work remotely or we're remotely working during the pandemic. So kind of getting back to that.
Yeah. I sometimes find it funny. My husband will, because people I talk to a lot don't live here in New Orleans, So sometimes it can feel a little funny because I have all my mom, friends. And then I have my friends who live in other countries and different time zones. But it feels like they're all in my community, And so I feel very lucky for that even though remote work can't be isolating, I don't feel isolated because, got people. Mm-hmm.
Do you attend any meetups or things like that locally?
Yeah.
Is that going on in New Orleans? That's great.
Absolutely. There is a good community of that. Every week there's something called Hack Night. People just go to the bar and hang out. There's a really cool meetup called Below Sea Level, which is a systems programming meetup. I try to get to those when I can. Sometimes it's hard with kids. But yeah, we're very lucky here that there is a good community. But I guess for specifically Elixir, there isn't an Elixir meetup that I know of. And so, but it's still really great to be exposed to. There are definitely Elixir developers, but to have that kind of intense Beam experience that you get at something like Elixir Conf, that I have to go somewhere else for.
Well, we're about out of time, unfortunately. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience or anywhere listeners can follow your work or learn more about what you're building?
Yeah. I'm not very active online, but everyone is welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn or message me on the Elixir Slack. I'm Flora Louise there. I always love, or message me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat about anything. And yeah, I mean, the main thing is just Goatmeyer. That's all I have on my agenda right now. So hope to see people there.
Fantastic. So for our listeners, you can see Flora Goatmeyer and you can see Charles and I at ElixirConf in Chicago this September from the 10th to 11th. Come say hi to us. If you haven't grabbed your tickets yet, we have a 10% off promo code in the show notes for our listeners, and we're excited to meet you all there. Thank you so much, Flora.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you for coming. I think this was a great episode.
Thank you.